What's up, everybody? It's Andrea. Today, we're partying like it's 1899. My head almost blew off like Data's one time, and we asked the question, how do you encode a complex message into Data's brain using just a silver filing? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. We are back this week with Time's Arrow Part 2. This is Season 6, Episode 1. First episode of new season. It's always really exciting to wrap up. Yeah, which is kind of a weird thing, right? Because it feels like, but we're wrapping up Season 5. So I always feel like Episode 2 is really like the first real episode of the season. But this one is just so fun. And next week's is like really lame. So like, we're just going to go ahead and celebrate this for all we can. This episode was written by Jerry Taylor and directed by Les Landau. Now, after following the Davidians into the portal, Picard, Troy, Riker, and Beverly find Data in 19th century San Francisco as they try to stop the Davidians from stealing human lives. Also, Samuel Clemens is annoying AF. Also, Guinan is there. So, like, win, lose, win. Like, it's, balances out pretty well. What are your initial thoughts on this week's episode?
This one is such a fun one. Probably one of my favorite things about this episode is seeing the entire crew wearing their period costumes.
Yeah,
I don't think we've seen something like this since the Robin Hood episode with Q, where the whole bridge crew was in uniform. So fun.
Super fun. Like, this is definitely like more dessert. And as I said, like next week is a Barclay episode. So I'm just going to say, let's just enjoy the like high while it lasts, because this is really like peak fun TNG. We're getting to see great period costumes. We saw a lot of fantastic period costumes last week, but this week now we get to bring in like Beverly and Troy and Picard and Riker, and they each
and Geordi looking so classy.
Yes. And I love that like all of the characters are dressed in period costumes, but they're all dressed in different classes of period costumes. So Beverly is the doctor, and she's got the little apron and the curls and the little spectacles. And Picard is dressed more like a street worker kind of a thing, like definitely more like relaxed, like with his like tweeds and stuff. And Riker is dressed as a 19th century policeman, like a cop. I mean, it's just all of it. It's just so fantastic. It's so fun to get to kind of see like the whole team getting to join Data in the fun. Now, as we jump right in, Clemens is sounding eerily familiar about expelling people who are just not welcome here in his words. And I was like, he's talking to what looks like a reporter, and he's like, there are some people from the future that are here and they just shouldn't be here. And we just need to know people are not welcome here. And I was like, the next thing I feel like you should be saying is we're going to build a wall or something. And I was like, no, see, this right here, I don't like any of this vibe.
A time wall. Yeah.
Which is pretty funny because like you never build a roof over a time wall, and then that's how they come in anyway.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like,
So Clemens is talking to this like journalist, this newspaper reporter. And the reporter's taking feverish notes, and he goes, wow, this sounds amazing. So this is all your next book, right? And Samuel Clemens is like, no, boy, this isn't a book. This is reality.
Yeah.
And he just, it's the worst. But anyways, he says like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to like have such a good story for you. Side note, this newspaper man, this journalist actually goes on to be a character in Voyager, and he plays a Vulcan. Yep. He plays a Vulcan named Lieutenant Vorik. And because, the way that Voyager is, the ship has been sent to the Delta Quadrant, so you don't run into a lot of Alpha Quadrant aliens. So he's one of like, 2 Vulcans on the ship or whatever. There's not many Vulcans. But the reason why he stands out so much to me is that there's a whole episode where he goes into Ponfar for the very first time because he's very young. So he has his first Ponfar on the ship. And as you know, Andrea, and you who's listening, as you know as well, that when they're in Ponfar, they need to be mated. So they need to be with their spouse, or if they are not married, they need to take a spouse and enjoy their Ponfar period. But because they're in the Delta Quadrant, there aren't any Vulcans for Vorik to be with. So he snatches up B'Elanna, and he's like, you won't mate me. And she's, part Klingon, so she breaks his nose. She's like, touch me again, and it'll be the last thing you ever do. But he does, he transfers the Ponfar hormones to her. So then she goes into Ponfar.
She goes into heat. Yeah.
Yes, it's such a good episode. But anyways, when I rewatched this episode after watching that episode, I was like, this guy's voice sounds familiar. And so I did a little IMDb, as I am ought to do,
Yes.
and discovered that. And I thought, oh, that's so fun. He's one of several characters who were on different Star Trek shows who show up again in Voyager, including the other Vulcan. He was in one of the Star Trek movies, and then he shows up in Voyager as a Vulcan. It's very cool. Anyways, that's just a little aside.
That's super cool. Like I had no idea because, you know, I never really watched a lot of Voyager. And like, I love all that. I love all of that like backstory because you're like, wait a minute, we see this character again. Now that is very, very much in keeping with the Star Trek actor portfolio where like one actor will play a bunch of different roles. For
like
example,
Neelix was a Ferengi and then he came back as a Talaxian, like a lot of actors.
Yes. Well, actually like we have reached the final boss of the most punchable face in Star Trek history, and it is Samuel Clemens. But he plays that doctor from that like dying planet where they kidnapped Wesley and a bunch of kids because they're trying to repopulate the planet.
Back in season 1 or 2 or something.
1 or 2. It's like season 1 or 2, and Wesley's got to be like the team leader and kind of corral all the kids to like, you know, rebel against. To like rebel in some kind of way. And I was like, oh yeah, that guy. And like that guy was okay, but
that guy was fine.
Dude,
I mean, he was a kidnapper, but he wasn't annoying.
I mean, he was a child kidnapper. So beyond that, like, I mean,
besides that, he was very nice.
I mean, not that kidnapping is ever okay, but like they had sort of a legit reason. Anyway, the point is, but the character itself wasn't a grating person, but Samuel Clemens is grating AF. I can't deal with him. But
thankfully, his scene is short.
Oh my God. Thank God, right? It's short, but deeply impactful. Now, as Clemens is talking to this reporter, Data walks out of the hotel and down the street and passes the Davidians, who we've seen are the man and the woman, and they have the snake staff and the physician's kind of bag to like suck people's essences. And I thought, how does he not notice the snake? Because here's the thing. A normal person, any human, would have totally missed it. But he's Data. He's constantly taking in information at all times. So I would think a couple of people walking around with a snake staff would not escape his detection.
Yeah, but like, the snake staff didn't look anything like it did in the cave. We saw what the snake looked like when it activated, and it looked like a
became
snake.
Alive.
Yeah, it looked like an actual snake with like electricity coming from its mouth or whatever. But when it turned into a staff, it just looked like a cane.
Like a lovely, like ivory cane. Yeah, it looked really pretty.
Yeah. So I think he was looking for a living snake, not a cane that had a snake head.
Okay.
Because he never said, I'm looking for a cane, right? He said, I'm looking for 2 people who have a snake.
This is true. So I didn't think of that, but I was like, gosh, if it was like a cane snake and he knew he was looking for that, like he would never have missed that.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we do flash to Riker dressed as a very handsome policeman and Beverly in one of the most fabulous period costumes in television history, who are in the morgue and are scanning the bodies of those who died of cholera. And Beverly says, I just don't understand how so many people could have died from cholera. It just isn't that virulent. And I was like, oh my gosh, so many people died in the cholera pandemic and epidemic. Like, I love how they're tying in that most of the people in our history who died from cholera were actually killed by Davidians. Because if cholera really isn't that virulent, that means that like 90% of the people who died of quote unquote cholera in our actual past were taken by Davidians, which I think is really, really cool.
Oh yeah, that's super interesting. That's a nice
That is really cool, right? And one of the corpses has been like totally depleted of electrochemical energy. It's the 49er. And the Davidians are draining their neural energy. So I love how like Riker and Beverly kind of put this together where they were like, why would they do this? And she said, if I were a Davidian looking to suck out like neural energy or electrochemical energy from people, I would travel back to a time where like plagues and pandemics were the norm and people just dropped dead all the time. And the technology was also not that great to detect how they died. And that sounds really, it sounds a lot like the television series Loki, where like the variant Loki is like hiding in apocalypses where like people would die anyway. So anything they do is kind of undetected. And I was like, that's really, really smart.
It skirts the temporal paradoxes if you're in a place that's going to be destroyed in 2 days anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And the way she did it was it just felt so Sherlock Holmesian to me because this is the time period of Sherlock Holmes.
Totally.
So that was a nice throwback for me. And I kind of would have liked if we had Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as some kind of, pop up, but we're in San Francisco. We're not in England. So, hey. But in any case,
anybody's better than Samuel Clemens. Okay.
But yeah, it kind of made me, it had this Holmesian vibe, how she's like describing it out loud for us, for our benefit, to be like, I would go back in a time. And you're like, oh, that's why they went back. So I could
That's what they're doing here. Now we know.
Kill with impunity. So nobody would know what I was up to. And it's so sneaky. And then you're like, okay, we didn't know exactly what the Davidians were up to before, but now we know they're up to no good. And we also know that those little light balls, those balls of light that they were eating in the cave that had these terrifying memories, last memories, or they were echoes and imprints of human life. Now we know it's literally all of the neuronal energy being sucked from their bodies. So it really is a little ball of energy, and it does contain their neural pathways. So like their memories, their emotions, their thoughts.
Yes. All of that was perfect.
That was a really good tie-in too. Cause you're like, yeah, checks out. That totally sounds legit.
No, all of it sounds perfect. Cause now we have tied, not only do we now know what's happening, we know why it's happening. Like the Davidians are going back in time and killing people, and we don't know why, but it's like, oh, now we understand, like this is their only food source, which the Davidians end up telling us later in the episode, but it's like, there's no substitute for this food source and we must feed. And it's really tough because actually, I'm a teacher and I'm teaching middle school science, and I really, really love it. And we just finished a whole thing on space, and we got to talk about with my classes like quasars and pulsars and black holes and,
moons,
just a ton of cool stuff. Right. And we've moved on to marine biology. And so I showed them kind of a couple of clips of like life in the ocean and what it's really like. And one of the clips that I showed them, and I gave them a little trigger warning because they're middle school kids. So they're not little kids, but they're not super big yet. Because I was like, look, there is video footage that I'm going to show you of a pod of killer whales hunting down like a whale mother and her calf, and they separate them and they end up killing the baby whale and like eating it. And the kids were like, oh no, I'm fine watching that, which I was like, sure, of course you are. But a lot of kids are like, oh my gosh, but that's so sad. And I was like, it is sad. But it's also sad if the killer whales have to starve to death because there's no food source. Like, it's sort of like, nature does not care about feelings. Like, the Davidians have to eat somehow. And like, if you're traveling into the past, like, okay. Like, you are messing up the timeline though. So it's like that's a no-go. And obviously we can't have people just coming and like preying on our helpless, like past, like who has no idea how to combat this or anything. There's like no way.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also, when the Davidian later says it's the only food source and there's no substitute for it, like we've already tried, it's like, well, that is tough because this makes me question, how did your species even rise? Like, how long have you been coming into our past to like kill us? But also like, we can't allow you to just continue doing that,
Yeah.
Just like if I were a gray whale, I'd be like, yeah, no, I know you have to eat, but like eat something else. Don't eat me or my kids.
I mean, because it is survival, right? You're like, yes, it's sad if the Davidians don't survive, but it's also sad if the humans don't survive, and they both have to survive. So we got to figure it out and figure out another source. And the Davidian solution was, we're just going to eat you. And so the humans, because we can fight back, we're like, no.
We won't be allowing any of that.
No.
Now, before we get to that, though, the away team have rented a lovely flat with no money down, apparently.
And they've gotten clothes for everyone with no money down, apparently.
With no money also. I'm like, what?
They did it
also
on
their comm badges, but they all have comm badges. So that's weird. But anyway, so they're debriefing on like what Beverly and
$3 for each badge. Like, I don't think that'd be enough.
But those outfits all cost like a nickel a piece. Like, they're fine. Because remember, $3 is like $50. But anyway, they're debriefing on what like Beverly and Riker kind of discovered at the morgue and like what it can mean. And they're like, okay, how do we stop this? What happens? One little minor aside, have you noticed that Troy is forever struggling with her corset in this?
I love that.
And I was like,
love that,
girl, you would let's be real. You would never need to wear a corset. Come on.
Yeah, she's too tiny to ever need one, but because everyone wore it at the time, she was wearing it. But I love that she's like just touching it and messing with it because she's showing how freaking uncomfortable. And ridiculous. And this is coming from a woman who wears a onesie every day with her boobs showing. And this is uncomfortable. So this is uncomfortable, right? Yeah. I love that she's like, oh, because Beverly's fine with it. And I just think it needed to be acknowledged that these outfits are a challenge to wear. So yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, now they do say that like they still can't find data. You know, Geordi has like scienced some 19th century technology together to try to communicate with.
He's got a tricorder that can find any of Data's signals, but he says because of the technology, and in my mind, I'm just thinking like satellites and cell phones, right? He's like, because of the technology, they have to be like right on top of Data for that technology to work.
Also, they don't know that like he sold his comm badge, right? So it's like, well, you can't get a hold of him anyway.
That's true. I don't know if they're looking for the comm badge. I don't know what exactly they're looking for.
They're trying to communicate with him
and like
Data. They've rigged some way to communicate to Data, but they're not getting anything back. So it's like, well, he probably
got that comm badge back. Because he got all the clothes off their back, so he probably.
I know this is true, but he hasn't been wearing it ever since, though. So it's like, okay, so we assume he sold it for the money and then whatever. But the landlady comes and the rent is overdue, and she's like, "Mr. Pickard, the rent is overdue. It is 1 o'clock on a Wednesday or whatever." And she's having this whole thing, and he tries to sweet talk her, and you know, Picard is very charming, and Patrick Stewart is even more charming, and she's not having any of it. And I was like, "You go, girl. You get your money and you get your rent, okay?"
Or now, you all will be out on your ears
tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Tuesday at 1. It is now Wednesday at 1. There's no rent. Rent is due tomorrow at 1, or you guys are out. And they're like, okay, bye. And he's like, Mr. Pickard, right? And off she goes. Now, here's an OMG moment. The next thing we see, why is Jack the bellman letting Samuel Clemens into Data's room? Well, I'm sorry. This is a fireable offense right there. Like, we have a valued guest in our presidential suite, and you're just letting random people come poke around in his shit because he feels like he needs to be a Karen and get involved in whatever mystery Data's a part of. What is wrong with this guy?
We know that that's Clemens' intent, is that he's just spying on Data. But what he tells Jack is, because he explains it like as he's letting him in, he says, "Oh, thank you so much, Jack, for letting me in because." Forget what some letter of intent. He wrote some letter of intent that's going to help Data, get this great, amazing job, but he forgot to sign it. And if he doesn't sign it, then Data won't get this job and it's going to like ruin Data's life. So Jack is like, well, I'm happy to help. I want to help Data. So that's okay. But then he also says, but I would appreciate if you didn't spread it around that I let you in because like this could, not See, but I look good in the future.
I feel like... I feel like at some point it's like, you know what? How about this? You wait down here in the lobby and I will go up to the room and pull the letter real quick because we don't even know if it's in the room or if Data has it. And like all of that common sense.
Or like, no, we'll just wait till Data gets back. How about that? And he can just find the letter and you could sign it.
You know what? Talk to my manager, Karen, because this is like we're not doing this.
But he somehow sweet talks Jack and then Jack lets him in.
Young and nice and dumb.
I guess he seems like a man of the world, but this totally tricked him in like no time at all. So as he's leaving, he's like, "You remember my name? My name's Jack London. I'm thinking about going to Alaska and da 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 da." And I was like, okay, well clearly this is some important figure who I did not know, so I googled it, and turns out he's an American novelist, best known for writing the book Call of the Wild and a whole bunch of other books that take place in Alaska.
He was a huge writer.
Nearish Alaska.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that is nice too. They're trying to like throw in this like, oh look, the two of them were friends and they were at this hotel together and they all met. It felt a little Forrest Gumpy without being as good as Forrest Gump.
Yes, Forrest Gump had all these like wonderful like synchronous moments where they're
really good.
It made it really, really good. And it made Forrest Gump like a pivotal character in a lot of American history moments of the 60s and 70s. But this just felt really shoehorned and forced. Yes. And I was like, we didn't need to know that Jack was actually Jack London. And now watch there's a Tony and his name is actually like his family name is Stark and he's going to start an industry company and have Iron Man. It was just like, we don't need to shoehorn a bunch of fucking celebrities that nobody actually cares that much about.
He could have just been Jack. He could have just been Jack. I don't feel like that added into, but again, I think it's with that whole, like, we want to have it be Samuel Clemens. We want to have it be, this was supposed to be like wow. But for me, I was just like,
see,
why?
It just made me hate Mark Twain.
Just a little bit more.
I never hated Mark Twain, but it made me very leery of like any of his writing. So I'm like, if the real Mark Twain was anything like this character, I want nothing to do with this moron. But why did it have to be a celebrity? Why does he got to be like having adventures with a celebrity? There were millions of other people on the planet and hundreds of thousands of other people in San Francisco. Like, why couldn't it just be like a cranky curmudgeon who was just kind of like the neighborhood snoop?
Yeah. Why did it have to be Samuel Clemens at all?
It didn't
Yeah.
have to be Samuel Clemens.
It could have just been anybody.
Rick Berman, you did a lot of good with the show, so I'm going to let this slide, but this was the stupidest fucking shoehorn ever written. Like, why did he have to like rub elbows with a celebrity? Why? It didn't add anything to the episode. It actually took away from like the magic of the episode. Jack could have just been Jack the bellman who ended up like getting married and settled down and dying at the old age of like 94. Like, who cares? It could have just been a regular
and Samuel
guy.
Clemens could have just been Samuel Tate. Just like whatever, just a guy.
Samuel Friendly. Who cares? Yeah, whatever.
But whatever. This is what we have.
But he pokes around in the room and he actually sends Jack away after he's like, you remember my name, Jack London, wink, wink. I'm going to be famous like you one day, wink, wink to the audience and like breaking the fourth wall. And Samuel Clemens is like, all right, bye-bye, and like shuts the door on him. And he pokes around the room and he does find that Data has built some sort of machine and there's some kind of plasma ray or something fancy that's happening. And he picks a part off of the machine and the beam turns off. And as he's kind of figuring out like what
he's like,
that'll teach them. He hears like people coming up the stairs and a key in the door. And so he runs into the closet and hide. And Guinan and Data come into the room and they're like trying to hatch some sort of plan out of this pickle. Right.
How to get to the cavern specifically. The cavern that Data's head was found in.
Yeah, Data's head was found in. And Data discovers that something's missing from his device. And he's like, gosh, whoever took this piece, I hope they're not holding it for long because it's very deleterious to like organic life. And you hear it drop immediately onto the floor and they go to the closet and there he is smoking his cigars again in the closet. And he's like, eavesdropping is no, activity for a gentleman, but the deed is done like again. And they're like, did you notice that Guinan looks so pissed? She looks so effing irritated.
Yeah, and that's when she just kind of goes off on him. Is like, Data's business is his own, and I will thank you to mind yours. Like, get out of his business.
Get out of here.
He comes back with, it's my business. It's all of mankind's business, and I'm going to stop what you're doing. Whatever you're up to, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to stop it. And they're just like, ugh. Like, you
sound like such a Karen. Like, you notice a couple of 12-year-olds riding their skateboards and you got to go like take the skateboards away and wag your finger at them and tell them that they're breaking a rule that isn't even really a rule right now. It's just like, I don't know what you're doing, but you seem like you're having fun at it, so I'm going to stop you. And it's like, why is this? Don't you have parties to attend to and book signings to go to and celebrity whatever the F's you're doing? Why do you need to stop Data?
To be fair, he does think that Data and Guinan are doing something to like damage the whole entire planet. But instead of being direct, he's being sneaky and wasting time. But to be fair, he does think he's stopping some huge plot that only he knows about and no one else could stop or whatever. What I do like about this scene is that he's trying to catch Data in a lie. And he's like, where were you from in Belgium again? Or Switzerland or something? And he goes, I am French. And then he's like, what's this device here on your desk? And he's like, it is a time shift. It is a gearing mechanism for the horseless carriage, because earlier Jack had said, what are you building? And he goes, what do you think I'm building? And he goes, maybe an engine for a horseless carriage. And he goes, that is a very good guess.
Yes.
So he's just like taking it all in. So at this point, when Clemens is like, what is this exactly? And he points to this machine. He goes, it is a gearing mechanism for the horseless carriage. Like, he already has an answer ready. And Clemens is just like, thwart it again. You always have an answer for everything, but I'm gonna catch you, Mr.
But
Data.
no, he actually was like, don't try to throw this horseless carriage bullshit at me. I know that's not what you're doing. And Data's like, dang it. He's like, yeah, you have an answer, but he's like, don't try any of your tomfoolery, like psychological tricks on me, sir. It's not working. And I was like, well, he's smart enough to know this. Now, he also has been poking around in Data's business. He knows that Data has been he does know that Data has been to the Historical Records Office, the Geological Society, and several other things. So he's like, I know you're up to something.
You sure do get around, Mr. Data, as do you, Mr. Clemens.
Yes, which
you're
I
going
love.
everywhere I've been.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's like, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is you're doing, I'm going to stop you. It's like, okay, well, and good luck to us all. Now, Picard and the crew are in the hospital, and Picard has placed these Tryon detectors in the lamps. And when one of the hospital workers comes, I think it's the doctor, he comes in and he's like, what are you doing over there? And he tells the man that he's replacing the parts of the lamp to make it more stable in case of an earthquake per city ordinance. And he kind of packs it up and covers up the like future technology he's got. And packs up his ladder and off he goes. And the doctor goes, when would he ever have an earthquake? And of course I was like, well, I know about the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, but I didn't know a whole bunch of detail. Like I knew it was a really big and really bad earthquake, but I did like a mini dive on it. Now, the San Francisco earthquake hit in 1906 at like 5:30 in the morning while everybody was asleep. It was a very, very bad time for an earthquake to hit. Although one of this magnitude, it was between 7.7 and 7.9 on the Richter scale, and it lasted nearly a minute, which is a terrifyingly long amount of time for an earthquake. I've lived through a number of earthquakes being from Southern California, and the really, really long earthquakes go on for like 8 to 10 seconds. So almost a full minute. I mean, that just went on for an eternity. Over 80% of the city was completely destroyed, completely. And more than 3,000 people died, being crushed like in their beds. The earthquake also ignited several large fires that burned the city for 3 to 5 days before everything was totally put out. The survivors absolutely felt like the apocalypse had come, like the world had ended. And this earthquake is thought to be on the same scale as like the volcanic eruption of Pompeii, like a huge natural disaster for the books. So I did actually think like, oh, Picard, were you actually changing something in the lamps, like as well as adding a Tryon detector? Because then,
I'm sure he wasn't.
But I don't know. I don't know, because I feel why? Like he breaks the prime directive all the time.
Well, because what difference is it going to make if he changes one lamp? He only put it in that one lamp because that's where that was the ward where they were going to detect the aliens. It wasn't. Yeah, that's why I'm like, no, he wasn't really trying to save the world from an earthquake. No, he was just trying to put in the detector and give a plausible reason and saying like, oh, because of earthquakes was plausible for Southern, for California. But the doctor was just like, earthquakes? We don't get no stinking earthquakes. So it was like, oops. Oh, right. Not yet.
Yeah.
It's like one of those.
You will in like 20 years or so, but yeah, like a big one. And you will probably die in it. Yeah.
So it won't matter either.
They leave Beverly to work with a patient who needs a little bit of help. And the Tryon detector goes off when that Davidian couple walks in. And Beverly's like, oh shit, because there's a little alarm that goes to her tricorder and it goes off and she's like, oh my God, she turns around.
She's the only one in there because everyone else is like walking around the hospital trying to find this Davidian couple.
Yes.
And doing their own investigations.
She hits her comm badge so that they know like to all meet back where she is. And I love how they walked in like 2 seconds after the Tryon detector was like set up, but that's perfect. And she intercepts them before they can suck the patient dry of neural energy. And she's like, do you need a doctor? Do you think, what do you think his temperature is? And they're not speaking and they're just looking at her, which made me wonder, I'm like, could they speak at all? Were they just shapeshifty, but like their ability to communicate was like not there? But she stalls for time before the whole gang bursts in and engages in a fist fight with the Davidians. And there's just like pow, crush, boom, like practically like sound effects. And they seem unharmed by phasers, but they transport away just before they're captured. Now, while this is happening, it looks like Data has made kind of like a Richter scale for triolic wave patterns. And as soon as that thing starts kicking off, somehow it's able to like triangulate where this is happening, because he grabs 2 horses and a carriage from where, I don't know, and steals them and just makes way to the hospital. And as soon as like the group is now on the run, because like the police show up and they're like, wait, who are you? Like, what department are you in, Riker? And he's like, oh, I'm new in Department 4. And the guy's like, I'm from Department 4. Wait a minute. You stay here for questioning. And they're like, I'm super sorry. And then they punch the police officer in the face,
Riker
knock him out,
punching
and
out
off
the
they
cop.
run. Yeah. He's like, well, I already punched a couple of Davidians. Like, might as well punch a police officer. And the like Data swoops in and like saves the day.
So during this big fist fight, couple important things that happen. One is, we don't hear the Davidians talk, so that's a little sus. They try to escape by activating their Ophidian, their snake, and Snake does activate, and they do get to go through the portal, but someone snatches the snake staff from them, so they lose it, and Riker now has it. So when the cop comes in and he's seeing all the commotion, and he's like, I heard there were gunshots coming from here, but it was really like phaser fire or whatever. But he's like, what's the weapon and whatever else? And he sees the staff, and the cop takes the staff, and he's like, this is a gentleman's cane. I don't know what you guys are doing with it, and I don't recognize this cop, and he's really suspicious. So Riker's just like, okay, too many questions. We don't have time for this. Knocks the guy out, takes the staff, and they just all make a break for it. They run out, and the second they run out, Data comes around the corner with the horse and carriage. So it was just perfect timing. They all jump in the carriage, and Data's like, I suggest we make our introductions once we're safely away. And they're like, good idea. So they fly away, they go back to Picard's home, and the cops are blowing their whistles and running behind the carriage. and trying to catch them, but they don't. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, surely everyone knows where Data lives, though. He's like the one albino in all of San Francisco. But actually, rethinking this, and something that we said in our last episode recording, is that he purposefully did not go outside. He was only outside like a couple times. When he first got there, he was outside. When he saw the Davidian couple at the beginning of this episode, he was outside. And for the most part, Jack was doing all his errands. So it is conceivable that people just walking down the street would be like, oh, that's that guy who's staying at hotel such and such in room such and such, right?
Yeah, but they ended up Picard's flat. They didn't end up at Data's hotel room.
Just when his carriage went around the corner and it's being driven by an albino, that everyone on the street is what I'm saying would be like, oh, that's the guy that's that really weird Frenchman who's staying at the such and such hotel, is what I was thinking, because that's how small towns are. But, assuming he went far enough away from his hotel, and he's been keeping pretty low key, went to Guinan's party. He only went out a couple times. So I'm like, okay, maybe not everybody knows who he is. And so they ended up at Picard's place, and now they are examining the cane. They're trying to figure out what it is, how it works. And basically they discover that the snake responds to triolic waves, and that kind of activates it. And that the cavern is this focal point, almost like a magnifying glass that amplifies the triolic waves, that helps the snake kind of point that power to open up portals. And so they shoot it with a triolic beam or something, and you see it kind of become a real snake for a second, and it snaps back into cane mode.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes. Now they do those couple of tests on it. And that's like when they realize that the Davidians must have some sort of way of like stabilizing this rift, as like it was large enough for like several people to walk through, and it's like stable for several minutes time. But this was just kind of like blinks.
It was like flickering.
It was flickering like rift, like a time rip. And it was like, that was really interesting. Now, while they're kind of wrapping this up, the landlady comes to yell at Mr. Pickard again. And he does manage to kind of charm her this time, because he's like, we want you to read the part of Titania in our play that we're going to be putting on, and we played in like London and Broadway and like whatever else. And so she like very clumsily reads a few lines, and I love that Troy has to very, very surreptitiously like turn over Geordi's book, because Geordi like can't have a visor on. Like he wears like little like dark lenses. Yeah, he wears like dark sunglasses, which like blind people at the time wore. And so he couldn't tell that his book was upside down, but the missus didn't notice. So like I love that Troy kind of like turns the book around, and they're doing a little reading, and she does a very clumsy reading of Titania, but they're like, I do not need to hear anymore. Okay, rehearsals start tomorrow at noon. And he like kisses her on the cheek, and she's like,
yeah,
like, she goes,
she totally titters and
about the forgot about the rent.
Yeah, she could care less about it. She's gonna play Titania. Yeah, which is just it was very cute. It was a very cute scene. And then we kind of take a glimpse back to the hospital, where the journalist is there and he's interviewing people, and Clemens is there. Why is he there? We don't know, but he's there. And he's kind of like, figuring out from the reporter what all happened at the hospital. So the guy, the reporter's like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then there was a brawl, and then there was a shooting, and it's like this fantastical story. And he's like, and then an albino came around the corner in a horse and carriage, and they all escaped. And Clemens is just like, yeah, Mr. Data. And the journalist is like, wait, you know who that is? Right? It's like, maybe we should tell the police this person's identity. No one said that. Yeah. They were just like, wow, you know who that is? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I know more than now. He's got more with him. Like this is escalating very quickly from what it was just a few hours ago. So Clemens is not having any of it. And he's like, look, when's your deadline? 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever. He's like, all right, I'm going to have a great story for you, because I already know where they're going. I already know what they're up to. I'm going to capture them, because and give you the best story of your life.
Guinan had been saying we need to get to the caverns under the Presidio, which is a small national park in San Francisco, which I looked up, and I was like, okay. So now he knows like they're going under the Presidio, like to do whatever like evil doing they're going to do. Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, and I love that like while this is happening, Data walks in with Guinan, and Picard like kind of does this like very like fateful sort of walk up to her, like, you're here, like this is why you said I should come on the away mission.
Because
And
he
goes,
didn't know. None of them knew
yeah,
Guinan was there.
none of them knew. Like, how would they have known, right? Because she didn't spill the beans, although she totally could have. She would have been like, look me up at this address and I will help you or whatever. But okay, whatever. But he goes, Guinan, it's you. And she goes, do I know you? And he goes, no, but you will. And I just love that because then she kind of looks at him like,
and then
really?
She goes, do you know me? And he's like, I like to think so. And like, oh, that's so mysterious.
Yes, it's so cute. It's so cute. So like now we've kind of got this like merging of like all the storylines. And in the caves below the Presidio, the away team like tricorders to detect the entire cavern that's been like molecularly manipulated to focus the time-space distortion. This is where the Davidians have been entering and exiting. So that's why there's so many like trial like energy frequency waves like all over like left in, because this is like those trial
this is
waves.
Their door, basically.
This is their doorway. This is why like the Ophidian can like open the gate, but it's not stable unless they're like entering and exiting from this cave into their cave that has that trial like wave pattern as well. It was like, okay, for fake made up technology, it makes tracks to me. It's fine.
Sense. Yep.
Makes perfect sense.
I love it when that happens, when it makes sense. And you're like, yeah.
When fake technology makes sense, when it tracks, isn't that great?
Because that takes a little bit extra effort to make sure that the fake technology makes sense. And I appreciate that.
And it takes that little bit that I think the audience really appreciates, because you go, that works. Because when you watch a story where there's something so wildly out of character or something that doesn't add up.
Had that stupid string, that like space string, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's only 2 microns wide and it's like a bajillion miles wide. And you're like, what? Huh? Like, why call
Are we just looking at it really zoomed in? Like, what the F is this? Yes. Now, as they're figuring out how to open the space-time distortion, Clemens shows up with a gun, which is one of the Colt 45 that was found by the archaeologist at the beginning of the episode. And he holds them all hostage. But the Davidians happen to transport in at the perfect time and steal the snake staff from Data, who fights back, and in the ensuing fracas is hit by a powerful burst of energy. And guess what? His head is torn clean off. Full circle. Now we are full circle. And
what a shocking moment. His head just pops off and you're like,
oh my
gosh.
Champagne cork. I was like, wow, it just tore clean off his body. And in the ensuing like circus of it all, Guinan is also hit by some energy or something because she's knocked unconscious. So now this doorway is open and stable. And so the whole away team
and
is
one
like,
of the Davidians was also knocked out. But the other Davidian is like, suckers, and turns around and runs.
Leaves her there and is like, I'll come back for you, I swear. And like just leaves her high and dry, right? With aliens who know what she's up to. But that's beside the point. Like the whole away team follow him back along with Data's body. And Picard is like, I'm going to stay with Guinan because she's hurt. Now, even Mr. Clemens runs through at the end.
Just as the portal's closing and there's only like a little bit left, Samuel Clemens jumps up and dives headfirst through the portal. And you're like, ugh.
Why?
You of all people.
Why?
This is what you wanted. You wanted to get rid of them. And now you're like, wait for me, guys.
Yeah, so, I'm going to go to your lair. Like, okay.
He jumps in. Picard's staying back with Guinan to just, be with her because she was hurt. And also this Davidian happens to be like laid out in the corner. Data's head has rolled under a bench or something. The gun, I think, is still maybe I don't even know what happened to the gun. And they're all just kind of like,
they like throw his head through the portal as well to be like, here, reattach this. Like
they could have done anything, but
you could just
they didn't have time for that. Though. It's fine. They barely had time to run through the portal.
Yeah, and they
leaving Picard behind is really like a hard call. They would not have done that if he hadn't ordered them to. Because it's like
he stayed because Guinan needed help.
Yeah, and it's like Captain Davidian. This is why we don't bring you on away missions because of this. We go back in time and you don't want to come back. This is why.
Yeah. But even though it was really annoying that Clemens like jumped into the time portal with them, like it's going to work out nicely in the end. So whatever. But the away team and Clemens have gone through the portal and they end back at Davidia 2 in the current time and they beam up to the ship. And
I love Riker's like, what are you doing here? When he turns around and sees Clemens dusting himself off with the rest of the away team, like
as Data's body is like strewn across the transporter pad, it's like, oh, Mr. Data, I'm sure he'll be fine. He's a Frenchman. Man. They rally like you couldn't believe, right? So, so I love that he's like, Mr. Worf, escort Mr. Clemens to like his quarters and make sure that he stays there.
Keep him under lock and key, like he needs to be guarded.
Like as if the doors have locks in the first place, but whatever.
Which
but
they
like,
don't.
which they don't. So he would be poking into all kinds of stuff. But I love the moment that Clemens sees Worf and he's like, "Oh my God, it's like a
werewolf."
monster.
That's what he says.
Werewolf.
He goes, "Oh, werewolf," and you just see Worf like, "What the?" And Riker's like, "Don't pay any mind to him." And Worf just rolls his eyes. It's
that is so great. That's so great. And Troy is like, "Why don't I take him around?" He likes to see himself as like a very genteel sort of like a man of the world. He knows his way, like kind of around like how to treat a woman nicely. So, you know, he'll take my arm and I'll take his arm and I'll just walk him around. So she's still in her period drama clothes. She takes him around for a minute and then she gets changed. And we see her later, like in her onesie. That looks and I guess, way more uncomfortable than any corset she kind of does. Wearing.
But I guess, you know, temporal prime directive is not a thing at this point because we're just showing him around the ship and chit-chatting with him and showing him all kinds of future technology. This should be a no-no. But in this episode, it's just like, what else do you want to see? Yeah, we got replicators too. Yeah, big ones and little ones.
Do you want you want to take one back with you? Is that you can make a killing?
We have some.
There was a time traveler that tried to do this, but he was stealing it, so we couldn't let that happen. But we'll just give you some.
That was a no. But for you, I mean, since you did come and all, you know, it's just like there was no temporal prime directive. They were just taking him around the ship, showing him all the stuff, and I was like, okay,
let's just show you. But they did say, like, she did.
It was more interesting as a viewer for sure.
Yeah, like she did end up kind of convincing him that like. We as people have solved, the future is like worth all of the work because we have solved like poverty. And with the solving of poverty came like equal education and healthcare. And like when no more poverty existed, people didn't have to work. They just contributed for like the general welfare. It's very much like built on like a very communist type of society where it's like everybody just works and all your needs are taken care of, which sounds great on paper and totally doesn't work in real life.
For some reason it doesn't, but it seems like it should, but it doesn't.
It should, except for the part of the equation where humans come into it, where humans will never, ever want ever to live in equality. And obviously somebody is going to ruin it for everybody and needs to have more power than everyone, which then makes you unequal and it's animal farm all over again.
That is true. But in addition to that, there are also people like me. I'm extremely ambitious and driven, and I like to be the best at things, or like I want more. I'm not satisfied at a certain, you know, level or place or whatever. And I want to keep moving. And when I do an activity, so like, this is why I love rock climbing with you, because there's so many levels, like whatever level I'm at, I can always grow. But if it's an activity where there's no growth, I don't want anything to do with it. Like as soon as I feel like I'm getting it pretty well, I'm over it. And so I feel like that also comes into play in a communist type of society where everyone has to be equal, where no one can be like the boss, or no one can be like really, really good, better than everybody else, or no one can like grow in these really explosive ways.
If you're better than someone, then you are not equal. And then now we have inequality again, which is now we have
inequality. Exactly. It's like, no, you're not allowed to do XYZ. You have to be at the same level as everybody else, so everyone's equal. So I can also see that being a big challenge for people who, like me, are maybe not necessarily power hungry, but definitely, I don't know, maybe I'm power hungry, but definitely, you know, not wanting to just like all be exactly the same, but wanting everyone to have their own places where they can shine. I think you're right. Humans come into the equation and the math just doesn't check out.
It just doesn't work.
Clemens finds that whatever they've done in Starfleet, which is like magical and wonderful, is like
it's
not
pretty utopic.
It's pretty utopic. It's not what he thought it was going to be, and it's not what he thought they were coming to do. He thought they were coming to dissolve the fabric of his timeline and just ruin the planet. And he's seeing, and he keeps saying stuff like, there's a Bolian who walks by and he's like, that blue fellow's your servant. And Troy's like, no, he's a member of the crew. Like, you just assumed he was our servant because he looks different, but no. And he's just like, And he does come over to the light side and says, okay, you've handled my future very well. So I kind of feel bad about stalking Data and Guinan and trying to ruin all their plans and holding you at gunpoint. And I kind of feel bad about that now.
Yeah, I sort of feel bad about that. Can we just go, my bad, and just kind of sweep it all under the rug? Fine.
And he does now, when they come into the lab. Do you see how he like pats Data on the arm? And it's just like,
he goes,
Data,
hang in there, Mr. Data. I'm sorry.
Yeah. He says, I'm sorry. I misjudged you. And it's like, well, good. That lot of good it's doing him now with no head that you're apologizing.
Just a headless suit. Yeah, it's but you know, of course, Geordi being Geordi, he's like, well, we do have the 500-year-old head. Like, we could try to reattach that and like, let's see if it'll work. But you know, even Beverly was like, that shit's been underground for 5 centuries. Like some stuff is not going to work. Like dust alone, like is not going to work. Which reminds me, let me tell you this little very quick story of things sitting in a dusty place and what could happen to them. My mom always collects a whole bunch of random stuff or like just accumulates stuff and then refuses to get rid of it until I come along when she's not looking and I just throw away a bunch of trash. But she had one of those like dome hair dryers that you could use at like the beauty salons from like in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yes. And she was like, oh, great. I was like 15. She's like, I'll do your hair. And she plugged it in. And that thing had been sitting in the garage for like 15 years or something, or like it had been sitting in someone's garage and gave it to my mom. And she's like, I'll take it. And she plugged it in and had me sit under it. And because there had been dust accumulating in like the holes and stuff, that sucker burst into flames with my head in it. And I immediately went, oh my God, it's on fire. And so I totally like, you know, it just kind of hovers over your head and like blows hot air. I mean, it had been on for about 4 seconds before that thing was completely on fire and it was inside. So my dad unplugged it and grabbed it by its cord while it was on fire and dragged it outside and sprayed it down with the hose. And my mom was like, okay, so do we have a plan B for Andrea's hair? Or like, and I'm so glad, like, none of my hair got singed. Like, I didn't get hurt at all. But like, every once in a while, my mom is like, no, I'm going to use that. Like, I'll still be like you kept the hair dryer like that. Okay, we're throwing this away. I'm like, Mom, you're becoming the weird old lady hoarder. Like, I'm just going to start throwing shit away. But like, yeah, my head was in it and it burst into flames. Like, it was like one wisp of smoke, and suddenly it was like the explosion that blew Data's head off. It was like, like just a huge thing of fire.
Thankfully, your head was okay and still attached. That is a terrifying story. That's one of those stories where you're like, I will never get my hair dried again. Right? It's just like, I'm good. Have you turned that on?
My mom was like, come here, let me dry your hair. I'm like, no, I can do. You know what? The air is doing a really good job of drying. I'll just ride my bike around for an hour.
Yeah,
the air will dry it. For
air
free.
Will catch fire. I think it's good. It's good.
It won't. Yeah, I mean, it can, but no, it's not. So yeah, that's that's why things that have been sitting uncovered in dust for hundreds of years or dozens of years might
need a little blowout first. It might need a little. You might need to do the old Nintendo like blowing trick and just kind of get some of that dust out. But while all this is happening, Riker goes to Guinan and he does his like high moral ground shouting rant again, where he's like, you've got to tell me what to do. We've got to save the captain. And of course, she cannot tell him because it's her past and Riker's future. So she can't like betray the future. She can't tell him anything that could potentially alter what he's going to do, because that's going to change everything.
If I tell you, it might change what you do, and then things won't turn out the way they were supposed to. And he's like, but if you don't tell me, it could also change what I might do. And that's not going to work against Guinan. She does this thing where she just turns her head slightly and just looks away. And he's like, and like bump, 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 like off he goes. Like he's so irritated. Now in the cave, the Davidian woman comes around and it turns out that they can actually speak, but she's kind of going in and out of phase.
Which I really like this voice modification they put on her.
Oh my God. It's like she's been through like one of those like vocal modifiers where it's like you can't trace someone's voice. It's so cool. And she says that, and she's out of breath and she's like clearly dying. And she says, no weapon can destroy the portal. It will only serve to amplify it. And then she kind of like disappears back in her own phase, apparently.
Yeah. So she doesn't just say that for no reason. Picard kind of goes over to her and is checking in on her and seeing what's going on. And that's when she says, you know, he's like, why have you done this? Why do you come here? And she explains, we're coming here because our people, this is our only food source we could find in the galaxy. So we've come back in time, you know, we've come to this point, and this is what we have to do to survive. And that's when Picard says, there has to be another way. Let's work together. We'll find an alternative food source for you. And she says, there is none. We've looked everywhere. There is no alternative food source. We have to continue this work. And then Picard says, we can't allow that to happen. We have defenses. We will defend ourselves.
Yeah,
so
we will destroy.
We're going to have to destroy you then.
Yeah.
In that case, we're going to have to destroy you. We're going to have to destroy this cave so that you're not able to come back and take people. And she kind of chuckles and she's like, destroy it. If you try to destroy it, it's only going to amplify the cave. It'll make the portal permanently open and we'll be able to come as often as we want. And she kind of is like, you know, it's hopeless. And then she dies and disappears. And then Picard's like, oh crap, because his last, you know, word to Riker was destroy the cave, you know, like if I don't come back or whatever, make sure you destroy it because you have to protect the future and the past. So now he's like, ruh-roh. If we just do if they follow my orders, it's going to have the opposite effect. And now he's like, how can I let them know that when I have no way to communicate with them 500 years in the future? It's a very nice puzzle.
It is a really, really good puzzle. And like Riker is over here trying to lead an away team back to the Davidian caves. And on the Enterprise, back to the Davidian caves and back into 19th century San Francisco to like get the captain back and maybe even Guinan to get her some help or whatever, right? But on the Enterprise, the team is going to lock on photon torpedoes onto the cave site. And that's when Picard is like, I have to do something to make this not happen because I am totally trapped here and this is going to make this portal even bigger, right? So he takes Data's head and he pops open a back panel, which is always really fun to see, and he takes like a little silver filing and just kind of pokes around in there, and
he's like programming in something. That's what it always looks like when they program something.
How does he know how? Funny, exactly. How do you know what you're programming at all? Because even if your plan works, Data could come to and be like, chicken, barn, bucket. And it's like, they're not going to know what that means, right? Like,
somehow they always know.
With a little silver like shred, manage to put in like no photons, bad or something. And tries to, they try to reboot Data's body with the 500-year-old head, and it won't reboot because there's an iron filing in the back of his head. So cut to, Picard putting that filing in to send the message in, and it works. Like he comes to and he's like, I need you to stop. Like, meaning Data. Data's the one who comes to. So Geordi's the one who's tinkering around, finds the filing, and it's kind of doing this back and forth thing with time where we find that Picard put a message in Data's head in like some binary code or something, and then stuck the filing in his head so that the circuits would not complete. So then when Geordi's poking around, he finds the filing, and as soon as he pulls it off, he does some more tinkering, and then he pushes Data's on switch, which is always fun to watch. So he pushes Data's on switch, and Data like jumps to life, and he starts sputtering nonsense. And then Data tinkers around in his head, and then he's like, "Aha, that is better." And now he interprets what the captain said. Message. He's like, "By the way, are we about to fire torpedoes to the cave?" And Geordi's like, "Yeah, we are." And he's like, "We must stop immediately. I will explain later." And off they go, which is just it's like just in the nick of time, which is so this show, right? Like they're about to hit fire right away, and Geordi's like, wait, stop, everybody, stop, don't hit fire, wait. And then we find out he programs Data knows that that's what he said, like, do not send the torpedoes, and then Data interprets the rest, and he says, the captain seemed to think that it would somehow make things worse, so I think we need to make the torpedoes in such a way that they shift back into the Davidians' time before they explode. We don't want them to explode in our time. We need to modify our weapons to phase discriminate before they detonate. Right?
So basically, they're going to put those Type R phase discriminators onto the torpedoes
that
Geordi has developed from before.
And like, here's actually a question that like I will put to you and to our listeners as well. Time travel stuff tends to be a little messy at times, like time travel storylines. And here's my question. Data got that metal filing, that silver filing from Picard, right? Who like tinkered around and programmed a message and then left the head there alone. Now, Data currently with the 500-year-old head, wasn't able to speak, or they couldn't figure out like why Data wouldn't reboot. So when Geordi opened up the back panel and realized it was a silver filing there, it's like, how is that head existing in two places at once? Because even at the end of the episode, Data's head is going to end up at the cave, like just how like the story started, but he also has that 500-year-old head currently. So it's like, I've always been confused about that, because I'm like, wait a minute, we have two different heads, but yet when he put the silver filing in the one left on the cave floor, it ended up being like, this is where I'm confused by, where I'm like, how did that end up working out? Like, so that two heads ended up with like the same iron filing.
Right. So it was one head. So Data's head exploded, 500 years ago. And Picard put the filing in Data's head, and then 500 years later, that head with the filing is the head that's now in the Enterprise.
Oh,
it's just one head. It's just the time of that. When did that head get the filing? When the episode starts, the Data who's walking and talking does not have the filing in his head. It's not until later on when his head explodes that the filing gets put in, and then that's what they pick up from the cave.
So it's just one head. At the start of the first part of this episode, part 1, which was last week's episode, when they find the head and they bring it to the Enterprise, it already has the iron filing in it.
That head has the iron filing in it. But they're not tinkering inside of the head. They're just kind of scanning it to see if it belongs to Data. And they're like, oh, that's weird. And they just leave it there.
And then
the
mystery with the Davidian starts. And then they have to like deal with that first.
The head was just like, this is really weird. And Data is going to die somehow. And this is really disturbing. But they had no reason to go into the head to really like, make it work or anything. It wasn't until they took Data's body back, but the body didn't have a head, where they were like, okay, now we have to make the head functional. So yeah, it was just
makes way more sense.
It was just one head existing in different periods of time that you were seeing it.
Okay.
But it all works out. They rephase it, and Riker's like, let's wait 5 more minutes just to give the captain a little more time to show. Oh, because what happened before that? Sorry. So Data awakens, tells him the message, tells him to hold fire. The day is saved.
Yes.
So they run to the bridge. They still have the snake cane, and they're talking about how they can go. Riker's like, great, we have time to go get the captain before we blow up this
Takes a couple of hours to like do the phase discriminate changes on the photons.
To make those phase discriminators and attach them or whatever the heck. And so he's like, great, perfect, enough time for me to go back and get the captain. And then I think it's, who knows, Geordi probably, who's like.
Because of plot stuff is what I put it as. 2 people can go through to the past, but only one can return now, which that's weird.
No, only one person can use the staff. That's what he said.
Yes.
They said the problem is the staff can only be used by one person at a time, like with our ability to manipulate this technology. Like if we were Davidians, then we could at least take 2 people. We know they can do that, but we're not Davidians. So we can like activate it with our phaser or whatever, but only one person can go through it. So that means, so Riker goes, so then if I go through it and the captain comes back, I'll be stuck in the past because only one person can go through it. And they're like, yeah, unfortunately. And Riker's like, well, gotta do what you gotta do. And that's when Samuel Clemens comes on the bridge for some strange reason and says, hey, guys, what's going on? And then he goes, well, I'll go back because that's my time anyways. I should stay there. And then Picard can come back with the staff and like, we're all good. So I guess it turned out to be a good thing that he came. Yes, otherwise, we would have to leave one of our people in the past.
Yeah, that's why, like, while it's like annoying and inappropriate that he's in the present time, like in the future, it's perfect that he was there because they needed somebody to go to the past and stay in the past. And so he makes it back actually in the nick of time because they're like, okay, you'll have like 25 minutes or whatever it is, like an hour or something to like go get Picard and come back before we fire the photon torpedoes. As it turns out though, the Ophidian dropped him off like in the middle of Main Street, and he had to like hightail it and do this like sprint run to the caves under the Presidio. So it's like, it took me forever to get to you. No time to talk. You need to get through because this thing is gonna like close, and that's that.
I love that scene. I love that scene so much because Clemens is like, hey, Picard, and now they're all buddies, and he's not trying to shoot him. And he's like, all right, they got your message. They totally understood. They're going to shoot the cave, just like you said. Take the snake. I'm going to stay here. You need to go back. He's just like,
I'll look after Guinan.
Yeah. And he's like, Guinan's hurt. I'll look after Guinan. He's like, there's a bill to be settled at Miss So-and-so's, apartment or whatever. He's like, I'll settle the bill. He's like, all right, I wish I could have got a chance to know you better. And Twain is just like, well, just read my books. Everything that I am is in there. And they shake hands, and Picard takes the snake and beams back to the cavern. And we see kind of like towards the end credits, we see that Guinan's being taken out by stretchers. So Clemens does what I guess Picard could not do. He leaves her and goes to get help. I don't know. And so Picard shows up literally 10 seconds after Riker's finally like, we can't wait any longer. Fire the torpedoes. They fire the torpedoes as the torpedoes are heading to the cave.
And then,
you're like, wait, there's some temporal disturbance. And it's like, right when we just fired them, like, why couldn't you come 10 seconds earlier? But thankfully, Worf had decided to destroy the cave in 10-second bursts of torpedoes. So that first burst was not going to destroy it. They were going to like do it staggered for whatever reason. So when Picard shows up, you just see the cave shaking all around, and Riker yells to O'Brien, get him out of there right now.
Yeah.
And they beam him out in the nick of time before all the rest of the torpedoes detonate and destroy the cavern completely. And Picard is totally okay. And all is well with the world.
Yeah, so the Davidian cave has been destroyed.
Except for the Davidians. All is not well with them.
No, but this is a whole planet and just one cave, and all the Davidians live in this one cave. Doubtful. There's probably like thousands of other caves, but we're not going to get into that. But like now they can't prey on humans anymore, and like that's done, which is nice. And so what's done is done. they're taken care of. Humans are safe in the 19th century, except for the 1906 earthquake that's going to hit, and then they will not be safe, but not because of any alien, whatever. So act of God. But I love that Picard goes to visit Guinan, and there is no talking. Like, there's no talking. He just walks up to her, and she just looks at him, and he just kind of like leans, like sort of kind of leans his elbow on the table, and they just look at each other meaningfully. And I was like, I love that they are saying so much to each other without a word. And you know that as the scene kind of pans out and goes on to the next scene, you know they're about to have like the conversation of a lifetime. And I only wish we could have been a part of that. But the last scene of the whole wonderful episode is Samuel Clemens gets Guinan medical attention, and off they go. And he goes to take his pocket watch, but realizes that all things must be as they were, and he leaves it behind. And as he walks out of the cave, the final shot pans to Data's head, waiting to be discovered in 500 years. And that's the end. And I was like, oh my God. It's the end and the beginning again, right? Yeah, because it's like, well, now, yeah. But that's like the end of the story. And I think that is so wonderful. Like, I love this episode so much. I feel like I didn't really get to do it justice because, full disclosure, usually we record on the weekends in the morning when we're fresh, but we had, like, I was sick over the weekend also, so we're recording on like a work day evening, so my brain is kind of fried. So I will apologize if I was a little scrambled today, because I feel like I just couldn't quite do it justice, because there's just so many beautiful different components, and the like technology needs to be explained just right. And I'm so thankful, Shereese, that whatever you did in your workday, you did it better, because you seem to like have full capacity of your words. And I'm like, Samuel Clemens,
I did all my notes over the weekend like we normally do. That's what happened. Yeah, he was super annoying. But this episode was so great. Like, my final thought on this episode and the previous episode is that I just really love these two. They are just two of my favorite episodes. They're just like this feel good family style thing. There are aliens, there are space battles, but that's not the point. No. And it's just, I don't know. It's just really, like, I can't even put my finger on why I enjoy it so much. What are your final thoughts about this episode?
I mean, I just wrote, it is so delicious. And I'm really, I've just enjoyed this so much. And with last week's being part 1, and then the week before that was being the Inner Light, it was just like, like, I'm feeling the kind of like joy and serotonin boost that I imagine you would feel when you're playing the game from like a couple of episodes, you know, like a couple seasons back, which was a super creepy episode. But it's like just the level of like happiness that you feel. That's how I feel at the end of this. And I just feel such a wonderful sense of like, you're just swimming in like the best times of TNG. We really are. And I know that like when we wrapped season 3, we were like, dang it, did we really pass like the best season? And while I do think like season 3 had like most consistently the strongest episodes, even the best of the episodes were not this good. Like, so I feel season 5 had some hits and misses, like a little bit more so than season 3, but dang it, like that home stretch of season 5 was just like liquid gold. It was so beautiful. And these episodes are the whole reason that we're doing this podcast, because this is what makes TNG just so perfect, and the show that we've like loved.
Totally. And I'm excited / nervous about seasons 6 and 7, because I know season 7 I have very little memory of. I tend to not ever watch that season. I don't think it was my favorite season.
Like wrapping up stuff that we don't want to wrap up.
We want to keep going.
There is a very, very memorable quote from the series finale of The Office, which I really love. And it's the character Andy, who, because the premise of The Office is like, it's a paper company, but it's a documentary style, right? So like the characters like are all talking, you know, they do talking heads all the time. And his final talking head in the entire series is, I wish somebody would tell me that I'm living through like the golden years when I'm living through the golden years. Because that would just make it all the better. And this is what it feels like. We're living through like the golden episodes, and it's such a treat. And what's better is that we have this like really, truly beautiful and lovely group of people who listen along with our shenanigans. And like, just because of like the sheer like nostalgic power of Star Trek TNG. And this is really like what makes it so great. So what makes this journey so wonderful is not only that like I get to relive this beautiful nostalgic episodes, is that I get to relive them with you, Shereese. And we all collectively, like as a family, get to relive them together as fans. And it's just so fun. And I'm so appreciative. And that's all the saccharine stuff I have for now, because next week, Barclay comes back in season 6, episode 2, Realm of Fear. It's gonna suck.
It's gonna be great.
Thanks for listening. See you next week, guys.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.